So something that disappointed me quite a lot, I believe it was earlier this year, was a statement or a comment by Judge Kriegler, who was, of course, involved with this transition. I believe he was the chairperson of the Electoral Commission in the '94 election. And he made a remark sort of in passing. He's towards the end of his career and he's looking back. In an interview, he said what we essentially had in South Africa, and I would assume that he implied that we still have, is a choice between two options. And the way he framed it is, he said, you can have a well-functioning government that is immoral, or you can have a dysfunctional government that is a moral government. And of course, so what he was saying by that is it's a choice between the apartheid government and the ANC government. So the apartheid government was efficient, but it was immoral. And the new government is inefficient, but at least it's moral. And I would argue, and what disappointed me about that is that it's a false dichotomy. It's as if you can only choose, there are only these two systems that you can choose from. Either you have this white minority government over this big territory with all these diverse peoples, or you have the ANC with more than 100 race laws. And the reality is that there are other options as well. There's not even just 3 options, there are multiple options. And so I'd love to hear your view on that, this sort of false dichotomy, if you agree that it's a false dichotomy, and how we ought to think about government systems in a country like South Africa.
Yeah, it's absolutely a false dichotomy, and I think the reason why someone like Kriegler would want to create that false dichotomy is that it is increasingly in political discourse becoming unacceptable to not always get what you want. So one of the alternatives, for instance, is a very decentralized federal dispensation. That allows you to have an efficient and a moral government. But that does also necessarily mean that you do not get what you want. You do not get to have a distribution of land all over the country that satisfies your own ideological preconceptions. Because in a federal system, each area is going to approach that question the way that it deems appropriate to it and its citizens and its values. Now, you need to be comfortable with that, and a lot of people are not comfortable with that. And again, I take it back to this scientism idea almost that was born out of the French Revolution, this idea that we have, through reason, discovered what utopia looks like and what perfection looks like. We've had all these advances in science and so on, and look at how far we've come in a short space of time, and therefore we can also then design this perfection through government fiat. And if you're against that, or if there is a maldistribution of property, as A.J. van der Walt, a prominent legal scholar, said, also a transfer maniac, then there's something wrong, there's something evil occurring. And it doesn't occur to people who think like that actually know society is complex, and you have to accept, if you take freedom if you think freedom is an important value, that people aren't just tools in the desires of others, that the individual, that the community has a dignity of its own, and it has its own, even irrational sometimes, desires that it wishes to play out. If you think that is important, that if you think diversity is important, to take a word that's been kind of perverted, then you have to accept that there's going to be social outcomes in your society that do not perfectly align with what your ideological preconception is. And someone like Kriegler, and I would say most of our kind of high-level elite legal thinkers, to them that is anathema. The idea that there could be something other than this very specific redress program that the ANC has developed over 30 years. To them, that is almost wholly constitutional content. Even though very little of that is in the Constitution, they would elevate it to that level, and they would say that if, for instance, if the Free Market Foundation says actually the best way to deal with the poverty in society that we see is through a free market economy, because every example that you look at in the world where there's a freer market, people naturally gravitate towards doing the things that would tend to elevate them and their families and their communities out of poverty. So if they're allowed to do that, they will do that. That would be our argument, and then people would say, no, but then you're not actually consciously and deliberately through political means addressing the problem. And to them, anything other than that is unacceptable. So yes, there are alternatives. The federalism is the big one. It's a big contentious point in South African history, all from the start, I would say, which each and every time we chose not to go down that route, which I think both liberals and classical conservatives said, listen, this is really, if you want a unified single South African polity. You can only do it through federalism.
I was about to say that's probably the only way to save South Africa.
Exactly.
In as far as it could be saved,
I
is
agree.
to decentralize the system.